So I've got another question for you. I'm a cradle Episcopalian, but sometimes I think for new people, but also myself, because I've taken some of these things for granted and don't really understand them. I love about our church that we embody and practice the priesthood of all believers, that there are roles for everyone, that we're all involved in doing the liturgy. That feels very true to my experience of being at church, and how we do church on Sundays and Wednesdays and all of our ministries and that sort of thing. But I also know that we're a hierarchical church. Isn't that like the root of the word Episcopal? Somehow the episcopacy, we have a bishop, we have a presiding bishop. How does all that work? What does the bishop get to do that priests don't? And what can priests do that lay ministers don't? And what do you think about all that? It's a big one.
It is a big one. So the word Episcopal actually in Greek is episkopos, and it means bishop. So the Episcopal Church is a church that is formed around the bishop. I can't remember, I'm going to get in trouble here for my patristics class, but one of the early church fathers said, where the bishop is, there the church is. And it's in part because even in the scriptures where Jesus is calling his followers to take certain roles within the life of the church, he calls the disciples. And the disciples are different in some ways from all the others that are following. He's actually called them out to have a particular role, predominantly of evangelist. Very quickly on within the life of the church, within the first century, we had two, if not all three, orders of ordained ministry emerge. The most common one and we hear about this within most of the New Testament, we hear about someone was a presbyter, a part of the presbyterate, which we now translate as to the priesthood, or we had the deacons, and the deacons had a different role within the life of the church than a priest would. So overseeing this was the person who was called into the role of the episcopacy or the bishop. So we have James, the brother of Jesus, becoming the first bishop of Jerusalem. Peter, we have as the first bishop of the church in Rome. We have them called to the role of being literally the Christ figure to be in charge of the church in particular communities. The priest fulfilled the priestly role that had been inherited from Judaism, and it was no longer about offering the sacrifices, although it was to offer our community's sacrifice of praise and thanksgiving in the Eucharist, which the word Eucharist literally means to give thanks. It is about the work of the whole people.
Can I ask a question here? Well, I'm just aware that like when I was doing my question in the list, I left out the diaconate and deacons, and my experience is, that's just my own forgetfulness, but also I think there is some element of that role being a little bit misunderstood or invisible.
The diaconal role would be that of ministering to those in need within the community. And it is to this day, even though the diaconal role has changed somewhat, but it was always to articulate the needs of the community and to bring that forth, like to come into the church and say, we've got so-and-so who's a widow and they're needing us to look after them. We've got these people that are hungry. I actually think it's pretty robust at this point. It certainly was not overlooked at the time that the Gospels or the epistles were written. So you'll hear Paul talking about how important it is that you support Lydia or Crispus or whoever, these, and they were women, actually, not all of them, but that the deacons in this particular community, that he would admonish that community to support their work. It was critical. And it has always been a part of the ordained orders. But so, what do I think of all of this? One of the things I love about the way the church in its origins worked was that bishops were very collegial, and by the time we get to the great councils of the church, let's say the Council of Nicaea in the 4th century, in order for a decision to be made for the universal church, it took all of the bishops, all of the priests, all of the deacons, and the laity to have representatives there to make a decision on behalf of the church. It was not so much a democracy, but that if a decision was going to be made that altered a theological position or some kind of decision that would affect the life of the whole church, it couldn't be made just because I'm in Rome and you're in Jerusalem, and Jerusalem's not as important as Rome, or I'm in this part of the world. I mean, it's fascinating that early on. Then within the Roman Church, we got the bishop above all bishops. We get the Petrine order, where we have a pope who serves above as the bishop of all. He is, in fact, the figurehead of Christ on earth. Our church doesn't do that. We have maintained a collegiality. So even in the United States, we have our general convention where all the bishops of the diocese are present.
Cool. Thank you for explaining all that.
So the difference between what a bishop can do as opposed to a priest, as opposed to a deacon, as opposed to a lay person. This is what's really fascinating. A lay person can officiate at the daily offices with morning and evening prayer or compline and noonday prayers. A lay person can administer the rite of holy baptism. A lay person can officiate at a funeral. What a lay person cannot do is a lay person cannot celebrate the Eucharist. A deacon cannot celebrate the Eucharist. A priest and a bishop can. The things that a bishop can do that a priest can't do are to offer the rite of holy confirmation, or the reception into a church, recognizing confirmation in another tradition that we see they have practiced the same principles, and ordination. Although as priest, when a fellow human is being ordained as a priest, we all gather and lay our hands on a deacon or a priest, but we are not the celebrant. We are not the figurehead that causes that to happen. And they're considered to be the head of a diocese, and we participate in our diocesan life, and then there is all the groups of dioceses coming together that make the Episcopal Church of the United States.
So we love it when the bishop comes to see us. We pull out all the stops for the coffee hour afterwards with special snacks and things. How often does the bishop come, and do they have like a specific purpose when they come to see us? What does that look like generally? It will here, but kind of across the diocese.
Our diocese is small enough that the bishop can visit every parish once a year, and during that visit usually offers the rite of confirmation. The name that the literary title for a bishop is the Right Reverend. I am just the Reverend. A deacon is the Reverend. But if you are a retired bishop, your title changes from the Right Reverend to the sometime Right Reverend. So I propose that when someone is elected a bishop but has not been consecrated, they call him the not quite right bishop.
Oh, that's great.
Don't you like a good title?
The Episcopal Church sure does.